बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। अस्सलाम वालेकुम students. उम्मीद करता हूँ कि आप सब लोग खैरियत के साथ होंगे. And I welcome you all here today to the 11th lecture of Consumer Psychology. So as usual, let us begin our day with a brief description of what we discussed in our last lecture. Students, our last lecture was a detailed discussion on the topic of qualitative research designs and methods. We discussed 4 different techniques in the last lecture. These 4 different techniques included: number 1, depth interviews; number 2, focus group discussions; number 3, projective techniques; and number 4, metaphor analysis. So let us have a review. Let us have a brief review of all of these 4 techniques one by one before I take you towards the main theme of the lecture today. Students, when it came down to the topic of depth interviews, we discussed that depth interviews are conducted in one-on-one situation. It usually involves one extremely skilled interviewer and one respondent. Depth interviews are conducted in situations where issues that are to be explored are of highly private or confidential nature, in which one individual feels comfortable talking to one individual, and it might not be possible for one individual to speak in front of so many different kinds of different individuals present in the group. Which is why in the depth interview, privacy and confidence is provided to the respondents. Simultaneously, depth interviews are conducted in situations where market researchers are trying to deeply study a certain topic that is relevant to the marketing strategy. In the depth interviews, it usually goes on for 30 minutes to 1 hour. And the interviewer usually enters in the depth interview without having any pre-planned discussion guideline with him or with herself. In this case, the interviewer starts off the depth interview by establishing the general rapport, and then he or she starts discussing questions of very, very general nature. The idea is that first the rapport is built up, and then the general questions help break the ice with the participant, and then the participant starts speaking freely. At this point, the responsibility of the interviewer becomes to lead the participant in the critical corners, which means that the interviewer is free to guide the interview towards any direction that he or she feels is important for the issue to be explored in detail. Because after the depth interview has been properly recorded, videotaped or tape recorded, then a skilled researcher would sit and examine all of the proceedings of the interviews. At this point, it becomes very important for the researcher not only to understand that the information that has been imparted by the respondent, but also to correlate that information with different mood swings that the respondent goes through during that particular interview. Students, we discussed that depth interviews are conducted when detailed study is required of a certain topic. However, there are certain specific purposes of conducting depth interviews as well. These specific purposes sometimes include, number 1, copy testing. Copy testing means that when a certain product manufacturing company has engaged an advertising company to come up with a certain advertisement, then those advertisement agencies come up with a basic design of the advertisement. And at this point, the copy of the advertisement is also prepared. The copy means all of the words that will be spoken during the advertisement, or all of the words that would be written on the packages that describe information about the product. So in copy testing, information is read to the participants, or advertisements, different kinds of advertisements are shown to the participants. Another purpose of the depth interviews is to conduct auto-driving. Auto-driving means that respondents are sometimes videotaped while they engage in the process of buying. And later on, that videotape is shown to the respondents, and they are asked critical questions about certain actions that they have taken during their shopping, as to why did they purchase a certain product and why did they discard a certain other product. These kinds of questions help researchers find out that what were the important factors that the respondents were considering while making their purchase-related decisions. So students, this was about the depth interviews. Now let me give you a brief review of the focus group discussion as well. Students, focus group discussion involves usually 6 to 8 or 8 to 12 participants. In focus group discussion, the interviewer usually has a well-planned discussion guideline, which is prepared in advance. And the discussion guideline is prepared in relevance to the marketing objectives of the product's manufacturing company. So the entire thing happens something like this. If the product manufacturing company wants to explore certain issues regarding the consumer behavior, and they have engaged a marketing research company, then the marketing manager and the marketing research manager, they sit with each other and they discuss all of the issues in detail, and they identify all those areas that need to be properly explored. And based upon all the issues that have been delineated, a discussion guideline is planned. However, this is slightly technical to recruit respondents in the focus group discussion. When the respondents are recruited in the focus group discussion, initially a consumer profile is properly drawn, which means that the respondents in the FGDs will be the people who happen to be from the target consumer group. In this case, the researchers develop a screener questionnaire. स्क्रीनर क्वेश्चनेयर के अंदर रिस्पोंडेंट्स की सारी कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स और उनकी सारी डेमोग्राफिक डिटेल्स जो हैं उनको डिलीनिएट किया जाता है. मिसाल के तौर पर अगर एक प्रोडक्ट्स मैन्युफैक्चरिंग कंपनी यूथ का परचेज बिहेवियर स्टडी करना चाहती है तो और फोकस ग्रुप डिस्कशंस इज द मैथडोलॉजी, तो वो सबसे पहले ये डिलीनिएट करेंगे कि हमारा जो ग्रुप है उसके डेमोग्राफिकल एस्पेक्ट्स क्या है. मिसाल के तौर पर they might be interested in learning the consumer patterns of the youth who's between 18 to 24 years old, who are college going, who come from socioeconomic categories A, B, or C. So a screener questionnaire is developed in close collaboration with the marketing management as well as the marketing researchers, so that only those people could be included in the focus group discussions that happen to be coming from the right consumer categories. So in the focus group discussion, another important point is a pre-planned discussion guideline. A pre-planned discussion guideline is important in the sense that all of the issues that need to be explored, they are discussed one after another. And the responsibility of the skilled interviewer during the focus group discussion becomes something like this. First of all, he or she would establish rapport with the participants, and then he or she would encourage the participants to speak their minds freely with reference to their attitudes, their beliefs, their motivations, their frustrations regarding different products, and their consideration of different factors while they are purchasing different kinds of products. So the responsibility of the interviewer at this point becomes not only to encourage the participants, but also summarize the discussion in detail. For example, when one point is discussed and the discussion reaches up to a certain level, then the interviewer summarizes that part of the discussion so that the group could be leaded to the next part of the discussion. So interviewer's responsibility is to start question, then summarize the discussion, and then lead the interview towards the next point. And in this while, he or she allows or provides opportunity to all of the participants to speak their minds freely. So students, these were a bit of important details of the focus group discussions. Now let's talk about the third technique we discussed in the last lecture, which was projective technique. We discussed that projective techniques are based upon the psychodynamic theory of psychoanalysis. In psychoanalysis, which is a theory of personality, it is believed that most of the behaviors that human beings exhibit is usually driven by their unconscious desires. In consumer psychology, researchers are always interested in learning that what are those unconscious motivations to the consumers that impacts their purchase decisions. In line with psychoanalysis, certain techniques were developed that help identify the real causes or the real motivations behind certain behaviors to pinpoint that what was the exact cause or drive for a certain action. We discussed three important techniques in this regard, and that included number one, incomplete sentence blanks, number two, word association test, and number three, other person characterization. I gave you exercises with reference to all of these three techniques. In incomplete sentence blanks, I gave you incomplete sentences that you tried to complete. In word association test, I gave you stimulating words and you had to write a sentence on each of the word. And in other person characterization, I gave you the topic of a modern woman, and then I asked you certain questions, and you started answering those questions, and you started filling out information regarding the concept or the personal image that exists in your mind regarding the topic of a modern woman. Finally, students, we discussed metaphor analysis. In metaphor analysis, we discussed that in the 1990s in America, certain consumer research started emerging that was based upon the point that it is usually very difficult for human beings to convey whatever they think in terms of different words. They thought that it is always easier for the human beings to convey their real meanings and their real perceptions in terms of images or sounds. So metaphor analysis was a technique that was developed to help the respondents convey their impressions or perceptions in terms of images or sounds. We defined the word metaphor as the use of one form of expression to describe or represents feeling about another form. And metaphor analysis was a technique in which consumers are enabled to represent their images in an alternate nonverbal form through the use of, say, music, drawings, or pictures. Sometimes some researchers try to find out that what are the adequate services and what are the desired services for the customers. As you can see on the slide, some marketeers maintain that customer satisfaction is a function of the difference between what they had expected to get from the product or service purchased and their perceptions of what they received. So when we are trying to find out or pinpoint the customer satisfaction with reference to these 2 points, which is the expected service and the received service, then we can easily find out that on what point do the company's services are actually at the present moment. There are some more sophisticated measures of customer services as well. As you can see on the slide, a more sophisticated scale measures the performance of the service received against two expectation levels. These are number one, adequate service, and number two, desired service. Simultaneously, it also measures the customer's future intentions regarding the purchasing of the service. So, students, as you can see, that there are different kinds of ways that we can measure the customer satisfaction. However, conducting a survey becomes an important tool to find out that at what level the present level of customer satisfaction, and semantic differential scale usually helps out more. However, Likert scale can also be used, and in Likert scale we studied a variation which was called importance scale. It can also be used very effectively to find out that how important a certain product is for a certain category of consumers. So at this point, let's discuss the topic of mystery shoppers. Mystery shoppers are professional observers who act as customers in order to interact with and provide an unbiased evaluation of the company's service personnel in order to identify opportunity for improving productivity and efficiency. Let me give you an example to explain this point. Sometimes mystery shoppers are sent to the retail stores to see that how the salespeople are serving the customers over the retail stores, and if the salespeople are providing the requisite and relevant information to the customers with reference to different products that they desire to purchase. For example, in a bank, a mystery shopper could go and start asking questions about different products. And simultaneously, he starts hinting upon the fact that he or she might be interested in purchasing certain other products, for example, a bank house loan or a personal loan. At this point, the mystery shoppers are trying to check that how efficient or effective are the bank's representatives in trying to find out that what hint has been given to them regarding the purchase of a different bank product, and how fastly do they communicate that kind of information to the particular client. So mystery shoppers are an important tool that are used to find out the customer satisfaction, and also to find out that how the customer services personnel are interacting with the customers, and are they providing the right kind of services to the target customers or not. And simultaneously it becomes important to find out different ways for the complaint analysis as well. So let me take you towards the topic of complaint analysis. Complaint analysis is a system that encourages customers to, number one, complain about an unsatisfactory product or service. Number two, provide suggestions for improvement by completing forms, asking specific questions beyond the routine, like questions like how was everything. These are the routine questions. But if we ask question that were you satisfied with the services of the teller in telling you about your current account status, that becomes a more specific question. And in this case, usually such kind of questions are followed by the timing questions as well, as to how much time did the teller take in telling you about the exact status of your account. And this way, the bank's management would come to know that what is the level of services being provided by the personnel of the bank. At this point, this is important to note that when you go in a bank, all of the different employees that have an interface with the general public or the clients, they are also in a customer services role. And it becomes important for a bank employee not only to be efficient in the general banking matters, but also to be efficient in the customer services also. The third point in the complaint analysis becomes establishing the listening posts. Listening posts are the telephone hotlines where certain designated personnel are allocated the responsibility to take the telephone calls. Usually the incoming telephone calls are taken by these skilled personnel who are trained at handling complaints and queries regarding different services of a particular institution or an organization. Sometimes the people or the personnel who are charged with the job of complaint analysis, they actively solicit information from the target clients. This is when they are also in the role of making outgoing calls to the target customers and inquiring about their level of satisfaction with the existing services of the company. Students, when we are talking about the complaint analysis, it also becomes important to talk about the consumer defection. Yes, by consumer defection we mean कि कुछ clients ऐसे होते हैं organizations के या इदारों के जिनका satisfaction level gradually कम होता जाता है, लेकिन यूजुअली ऐसे क्लाइंट्स होते हैं जब उनका सेटिस्फैक्शन लेवल ड्रॉप होता है तो वो किसी कस्टमर सर्विसेज पर्सनल को बताने की बजाय अपनी सर्विसेज चेंज कर लेते हैं, which means that they switch on to another company without telling or informing the customer services personnel of that particular institution or organization. So it becomes very important to find out that how many defections are taking place and what is the pattern of defection. So analyzing customer defection helps companies find out the customers who are gradually being dissatisfied, so that these companies could come up with strategies to encourage the customers who are going to defect so that they could stay with the company. Let me give you an example to explain the point of defection. Let's suppose there was a bank who was regularly using 20% of its clients every year. They were trying to find out that what were the reasons for defection. And in order to do so, they were using one methodology, which was that they were gathering up all of the data regarding the defectors, and all of the data that they were gathering up was mostly the demographical data, which means that their age group, their level of education, what kind of services have they purchased from the bank, their family life cycles, information of the relevant sort. However, after tabulating that data for a long time, they could not come up to identifying a particular pattern to identify the clients who will be defecting. The point of emphasis over here was to be able to predict all those customers who are potential defectors or who are going to defect in a certain time period. At this point, they thought of a unique method, which was they first of all identified their highly satisfied and loyal customers. After they identified these customers, they studied their transaction patterns on 3 dimensions. Number one, how much transactions had taken place over 1 year's time period. Number 2 was what was the level of transactions. And number 3 was, let's suppose, what was the balance of the account. So after they had established the main point that who are the most loyal customers, then they had complete information about them with reference to the transactions that had taken place with these loyal customers. Now they were able to match this frequency of transaction with the transaction of other customers of the bank. And they were able to find out that when the transaction levels don't compare with the loyal customers' transaction level, then there is a possibility that these customers might be defecting. And this way, the bank identified the customers who might be potential defects in the future, and they developed strategies to encourage those defectors to stay or remain with the customers. Students, the research questions that consumer psychologists address pertain to large groups of people, broad groups of people, which means that consumer psychologists, when they are interested in learning about certain issues or exploring about certain patterns of consumer behavior, they usually conduct their studies on large groups of people, not on single individuals, which is why the concept of sampling becomes very, very important. To give you an example of the large group of people, let us suppose that a company is interested in learning about the youngsters' consumption behaviors regarding the food items. However, before they get into the main theme of the study, they first of all have to identify that who are the people that they are going to study. And their question is something like this: what is the favorite pastime of the college-going youth between the ages of 18 to 24 years? If you concentrate over the question, you will find out that this question pertains to a large group of people. And that large group of people can have multiple characteristics, demographical characteristics as well. The limiting aspect of this question is only that the students need to be between the ages of 18 to 24 years, and they are and identifying that what is their favorite pastime. This question, if you ponder closely, does not limit the sample to different sexes, to different socioeconomic backgrounds, to the students of different colleges or universities. This question only limits itself with just one dimension, that is 18 to 24 years old youth who is going to college. So in this way, this becomes a large group of people. Now, if consumer psychologists have to conduct a research over this large group of people, then who are the people who will become part of this study? So in the light of this example, it becomes important to understand that what is the concept of sampling. However, at this point, let's talk about the population. The group of people that a research question pertains to is usually and typically called a population. For example, in our last question, 18 to 24 years youth who is college going becomes a population of this study. The population of the study can be easily studied in some cases. For example, the biographical studies of the Pakistani presidents. However, when we are trying to conduct population studies over 18 to 24 years old youth, then our population becomes a huge number of people. Now, are we going to study all of those youngsters, or are we going to study some of the youngsters out of them? This becomes an issue of the sampling versus census. In census, we study the entire population. In sampling, we select certain group of people from the entire population to study, so that later on we could generalize our findings upon the larger group of people. So let us define sampling. as you could see on the slide, the subset of population that is studied is typically called a sample. In short, a sample is a subset of the population. To make you understand the concept of sample, let me take you towards this slide. In this slide, you could see a group of people. This group of people is population. When we select certain individuals out of this population, which in this figure appears to be 4 individuals, then this becomes the sample. However, sampling is not just conducted off the cuff. Sampling is conducted through a proper plan. So before going into the details of sampling, let me tell you a little bit about the sampling plan as well. Sampling is an important and integral component of the research design. Specifically, the sampling plan addresses 3 main questions. These questions are: question number 1, whom to survey? This is pertaining to sampling unit. How many to survey? This is pertaining to the sample size. And how to select them? This is pertaining to the sampling procedure. So when we talk about the question whom to survey, deciding whom to survey requires explicit definition of the universe of the or boundaries of the market from which the data are sought. In our last example, 18 to 24 years old people we are going to survey, and that becomes a population or the universe that will be studied. How many people to survey? Then usually 2 important factors are considered, which is number 1, what is the size of the budget allocated for the study, and number 2 is the degree of confidence that a researcher would like to have in his or her studies. Now, how these 2 points become important? First of all, what is the size of the study? Essentially, when we are talking about researching and sampling, the most reliable information that we could get will be when we study all of the population for that study, which means that if you are studying 18 to 24 years old people, then the most relevant information would be that is gathered through interviewing all of the individuals who exist in this age bracket, 18 to 24 years. But do you think this is possible? No. We cannot study all of the individuals because this will become too tedious, too complicated, too long, and too expensive. So we have to reduce the entire population down to a feasible sample that could be properly studied in a certain time period. So usually it is the size of the budget that would decide that how many people can be included in the sample of our study. The other point we discussed was degree of confidence that a researcher would like to have in his or her findings. The degree of confidence would tend to improve more and more if a larger number of participants have been studied. So, students, size of the sample is very important. Larger the size of the sample, there is more possibility that it would reflect the entire population, and vice versa is the case. If the sample size is small, then there is less possibility that it would reflect the entire population. However, it is possible that reliable results could be achieved with small samples of the population, which means that it becomes important that what kind of sampling technique is being used to select that particular sample. And even with the small samples, reliable results could be achieved. However, if the sample is large, then definitely reliability tends to increase significantly. Students, at this point, let me take you towards different types of sampling techniques that are used, and these are mainly 2 techniques. Technique number 1 is probability sampling, and number 2 is non-probability sampling. Probability sampling is a technique in which participants are selected in such a way that every participant in the entire population has an equal chance of being selected, which means all of the individuals or people included in a study have an equal chance of being selected. There are different types of probability sampling, which are mainly 4, and these are: number 1, simple random sample; number 2, systematic random sample; number 3, stratified random sample; and number 4, cluster area sample. So let's discuss these 4 types of non-probability sampling techniques one by one. These are number 1, simple random sample. Simple random sample is a very simple methodology in which all of the participants have equal chance of being selected. Let me give you an example to explain you this concept. Let's suppose there are 10 kids who are playing the game of lottery. They have to select 4 kids who will get the prize. Let's say they write the name of all of the 10 kids on different sheets of paper, and then they put those sheets of paper in a bottle. And they shuffle the sheets heavily, and then they pull out 4 sheets one after another. In this case, all of the 10 sheets have an equal chance of being selected and being included in those 4 sheets. So this is a simple example of simple random sampling. The next is systematic random sample. As you could see on the slide, a member of population is selected at random, and then every person is selected accordingly. Which means that if we are conducting a research study on the school kids, and let's say our study is focused upon the 3rd grade students, and let's suppose that there are 3 sections of the 3rd grade, then we say that we will pick up 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th kid from every section of the 3rd grade. In this case, we are selecting the sections, but we are randomly selecting individuals from each of these sections. So this way, this becomes systematic random sample. Now let me take you to the 3rd type of random sampling, which is called stratified random sampling. In stratified random sampling, as you could see on the slide, the population is divided into mutually exclusive groups, such as age groups, and then random sample is drawn from each group. For example, the population can be divided into different age groups. Then different participants can be selected from each of these age groups randomly. This way, there is an equal chance from every age group for every individual to be selected and become the participant of the study. Students, the next type of sampling is cluster area sampling. In cluster area sampling, as the word goes, cluster area, we divide the participants according to groups or according to different blocks. In this type of sampling, a particular geographical location is divided into different blocks where participants are residing. And then participants are picked up from each of these blocks randomly. As you can see on the slide, the population is divided into mutually exclusive groups, such as blocks in a geographical area, and the researcher draws a sample of the groups to interview. In the figure, the left-hand column is the entire population, which means all of the geographical locations in that particular area. In the column, the sample is selected randomly, which is denoted by the group X. And finally, in the 3rd column, the sample is drawn randomly from each of the denoted columns, each of the denoted groups in the middle column. So this way, the cluster area sampling is gathered up. Let me take you towards the non-probability sampling now. The non-probability sampling, as you can see on the slide, is specific elements from the population under study have been predetermined in a non-random fashion on the basis of the researcher's judgment or decision to select a given number of respondents from a particular group. Students, as you could understand from this definition, that in non-probability sampling, it all depends upon the researcher's choice, wish, and will to select participants from certain groups or certain categories. And researchers at the start of the research establish different criterion according to which they will pick up participants of their choice from different kinds of groups. There are different kinds of non-probability sampling techniques that are used. These are mainly 3. These include number 1, convenience sample, number 2, judgment sample, and number 3, quota sample. Let us define these 3 non-probability sampling techniques one by one. In convenience sample, the researcher selects the most accessible population members from whom to obtain information. For example, students in a classroom. As you could see, convenience sample is self-explanatory. It depends upon the convenience of the researcher. He or she is free to identify participants from a sample that is easily available to them. The second type of non-probability sampling is judgment sample. In judgment sample, the researcher uses his or her judgment to select population members who are good sources for accurate information. For example, experts in the relevant fields of study. In this kind of sampling, this is once again upon the will and wish of the researcher to select participants from a certain population and to select those participants which he or she feels are more convenient to study. And this basically depends upon the judgment of the researcher. The next type is quota sampling. Quota sampling is defined as the researcher interviews a prescribed number of people in each of several categories. For example, 50 men, 50 women. As you could see, in quota sampling, the researcher establishes a certain quota according to his or her convenience, and then he establishes a criteria that he would select 50 men and 50 women from each of the groups for participating in the studies. Students, at this point, let me tell you about the usage of the field staff in the quantitative research. I hope you would have understood the sampling techniques which we studied in probability sampling and non-probability sampling, and let us now discuss the usage of the field staff in the quantitative study. Students, in quantitative study, generally field staff is used to go in the field and conduct interviews upon the participants who have been included in the study. The field staff is either recruited by the researcher or it is contracted from the marketing research agency that has been assigned upon the job. Now, students, let us discuss the next topic of the lecture, which is data analysis and reporting research findings. In both qualitative research and quantitative research, report is assembled and communicated to the marketing management of the products manufacturing company who has hired the researchers for conducting the research. In quantitative research, it usually includes an executive summary in which the researcher delineates all of the findings that have been made as a result of conducting the research study. In the main body of the report, different graphs and tables are included that were used for the study. And finally, in the quantitative research report, findings or recommendations may also be included depending upon the requirement of the marketing agency or the marketing management of the particular product manufacturing company. Now, let me take you towards the next topic, which is ethics in consumer research. Ethics in any field of studies embodies all the principles according to which the business of that discipline would be conducted. These principles ensure that reliable methodologies have been used to find out reliable information about different topics that have been studied. They also ensure that the quality is always maintained in conducting the field, in conducting the business of that field of studies. Similarly, in consumer psychology and in consumer research, we have certain ethical principles that one must always be following. I will give you a brief outline of a few of these principles at the end of today's lecture. Students, the first point of the ethics of consumer psychology is consumer researchers must ensure that studies are objective and free of bias. It becomes very important for the researcher to ensure that he is free of bias, because if the researcher is biased, in that case, all the information that is gathered up will be according to the direction of his or her bias. This way, this information will not be reliable, and reliable information can only be achieved if the researcher is able to get rid of his or her biases. Now, let me give you an example how this point impacts the validity and reliability of the research. Let's suppose there is a certain group of people in a country who are opposed to the president of that country, and they engage a marketing research agency to conduct a research study to find out the popularity of the president of that country. That marketing research agency has already been tilting towards finding out the negative aspects about that particular president. So they start conducting a national poll as to the performance of that particular president. And they ask one main question from people who are participating in this study from the entire population of the country. The question is, do you believe that president should be doing a better job at running the country? And they find out that 65% of the people think that yes, president should be doing a better job at running the country. Now, if you look at this question, which says, do you believe that president should be doing a better job at running the country? We are talking about the betterment in the proceedings of any business. If you concentrate on this question is biased because it talks about the possibility of betterment, and that possibility always exists. It does not mean that president is not currently doing a better job. It only talks about the possibility in the future of doing a better job than the current level of functioning, and that is always possible. So this census is naturally bound to bring back negative results with reference to the president's popularity. However, there was another research conducted that asked the question in a different way, or that research study phrased the question in a different way. This time the question was, do you approve or disapprove of the way president is doing his job? Now concentrate on the question, do you approve or disapprove of the way the president is doing his job? Now this question can in a clear-cut fashion demarcate two possibilities. Either the president is doing a better job or president is not doing a better job. And the respondents will be asked to choose between these two available options. So the respondents will either say yes or they would say no. In any case, the results of this research would be more reliable because the question in itself is not biased, because it gives the respondents two genuine possibilities, and it gives the respondents options to select one of these two possibilities. So this way, bias in the research need to be avoided. There are the next ethical principle of the consumer research is that participants or respondents should not be mistreated. There are many different ways that researchers tend to mistreat the respondents. And these would be, number one, sometimes unnecessarily long interviews are conducted with the participants. And researcher at this point is always thinking that now that the participants are sitting with him or her, he or she can inquire about other relevant issues and get more information on that. So a respondent who's been told that the interview would take only a few minutes of your time, the time period goes on extended and respondent is tied up with the interview for a longer time period than he was promised. All on the researcher to find out more about different issues that are being discussed with the respondent. The next point in the line is, once again, the lengthy interviews on the telephone. The researchers or the interviewers call the respondents on the telephone, and they would never at the outset of the call mention that how much time this interview is going to take. Or sometimes the respondents themselves ask the question how much time this interview is going to take, and the researchers or the interviewers tell them a wrong time. This is a malpractice, and that should be avoided. On other times, sales pitches from telemarketers are disguised as research studies, which means that sometimes telemarketers make phone calls to the respondents disguising themselves as researchers and asking them different questions. This practice should be avoided because this brings a bad name to the consumer research end of the day. There are some general guidelines as well. At the start of all the interviews, researchers must clearly identify themselves to the respondents. They must tell them explicitly and clearly which company are they from and what kind of research study are they conducting. And they must explicitly mention that how much time are they going to take from the respondent. If the respondents are being paid for participating in that research, then it should also be settled down at the start of the research before engaging the participants or the respondents to be the part of the study. They should reassure the participants that there is no right or wrong answers. Students, this point sometimes brings back misleading information because this is our natural tendency to look at everything in terms of its being right or being wrong. And when the participants are not told that their questions are never right or wrong, then they tend to give into this kind of thinking. And they always try to find out the right answer in response to the questions that are being asked. So explicitly, if a researcher at the outset of the research tells the respondents that there is no right or wrong answers in this research, then the participants would feel free to relate to the topic in any possible fashion that they think is appropriate to their point of view. The next point is that privacy of respondents must be guarded. Sometimes it happens that while conducting quantitative researches, a lot of data is gathered up upon the participants. This gathered up data is sometimes sold by the companies to different organizations who are interested in marketing their products to these category of consumers. It happens so, for example, there is a company who is conducting a research study for a category of consumers who would be purchasing different products of a bank. Now, this category of consumers can easily be accessed by another company who are into selling mobile phones. Now, this marketing research company, after gathering up the data for the banking institution, may sell this data to the mobile phones company as well, and then the mobile phones company would also start marketing their products to the same group of people. This is a malpractice and this should be avoided. Students, these were some of the general points of the ethics of consumer psychology. I hope you would have understood them, and I sincerely hope that in the future, if you plan to engage in the field of consumer research professionally, then you would always keep these principles very near and dear to you. Students, this is the end of chapter number 2, in which we studied different aspects of consumer research. At this point, let me show you different key terminologies that we have studied in this chapter. I'll speak these terminologies one by one for you so that they keep refreshing in your mind. As you could see on the slide, these terminologies alphabetically are attitude scales, complaint analysis, consumer panel, customer lifetime value profiles, customer satisfaction measurement, depth interview, experimentation, exploratory study, focus groups, interpretivism, mail surveys, mechanical observations, motivational research, mystery shoppers, non-probability samples, observational research, online surveys, personal interview survey, physiological observation, positivism, primary data, probability sample, projective technique, qualitative research, reliability, research objectives, secondary data, internal and external, test marketing, and validity. Students, these were the key terminologies that we discussed and studied in this chapter. I hope you would remember them for future reference and they would add to your knowledge in the future. This is just about the time that we have to finish our lecture. Let me bid you farewell. अपना और अपने दोस्तों का और अपने गिरदे नुमा के लोगों का ख्याल रखिएगा. मुझे इजाज़त दीजिए. नेक्स्ट लेक्चर में मिलेंगे. खुदा हाफिज़.